Hey, Michelle, how are you doing?
I'm here.
Yeah, same. Well,
I, I'm
for
here and
those,
I'm
yeah,
not crying.
okay.
That's
This
the
is,
appropriate
yes.
response. I'm here and I'm not crying.
Yeah, I feel ya. I feel ya. Well, for those of you listening, welcome back to Michelle and Mickey's Performance Playbook. We thought we would talk a little bit about some attributes of, or what, how do I phrase this? How open-minded are you? How coachable are you? What are the attributes of being someone that wants to learn, that wants to improve, and that wants to, work well with a coach, and vice versa, and what, a coach should maybe try to do to help build trust and respect, and these really these dynamics that will make a good coach athlete relationship. What got us thinking about tackling this topic is actually my own experience very recently training my dog Iajun with a dog trainer, and it's been pretty challenging. I've gotten quite a lot of feedback from the trainer that's been really difficult to digest in terms of owning what I have probably been doing to contribute to potentially poor behaviors, bad behaviors, showing my dogs what kind of leader I am and what kind of leader they need. And that's to not to say that like I am the best leader for all dogs, right? Like it's more of a understanding your dogs and what they need. And I'll just be real honest, like it's been really hard. It's really kind of forced me to look at myself and how I interact with them. And this dog trainer, she's very smart. She's pretty like straight and narrow, like this is the situation, and there's some things that I maybe don't totally agree with in terms of what she, I think, is thinking that I'm doing at home, right? 'Cause she only sees us up at her facility and she doesn't know how I interact with them in the home. But what she did say to me, and I thought this was really key, was like every moment you're with your dogs, right? Like there's like a teaching and a learning opportunity, right? And so like every time you go out the door, like are they rushing out the door or are you forcing them to wait until you say it's okay to go out the door, right? Like all these little things, right? That they have to understand, right? And how they are in the home will often translate into how they are outside of the home. But the hardest thing I think for me is that I love my dogs. They're my entire life. I literally partially moved where I did to get them more access to the backcountry. So I've really tried to create my life around being a good dog mom and giving them the best life possible. And then to get that feedback that like, well, you maybe weren't strong enough. You didn't set the boundaries you needed to set. You allowed too much without them having to earn it first, right? For example, I'll just use the off leash example, right? Like I worked with my dogs over the years, not just the ones I have now, but my dogs that have since passed on off leash and like recall. But was it ever 100%? No, right? And I only would take them certain places where I felt very confident that we weren't going to run into other dogs and other people, and the wildlife would be at a, comfortable level. Although whenever you go in the back country, there's always wildlife. But the short of it is, she's like, they have to earn that right to be off leash, right? And I never really forced that. And unfortunately, now I am seeing um the risks, I guess. For example, I think I mentioned this to you, but I don't think I mentioned it on the podcast, which is Christmas Day. We always go for a big hike. And my two biggest fears for my dogs in the backcountry are hunters and mountain lions. And I am 99% sure that Braggy treed a young mountain lion. It could have been a bobcat, but it looked not like a bobcat. Anyways, the short of this is his recall is very good with deer and elk, and I mean he's recalled on moose, but we've never come across a wild cat. And so I'm just going to say this because people are probably thinking I'm an idiot for not knowing the difference. But the reality is when you're in the moment of like you've seen something and it looks like a cat run across a ridge, and your dog has caught the scent and they're off on it, and you're screaming and they're not coming back, and all of what was going through my mind is like, if it's young, the mom is here somewhere and she's going to maul
Mm-hmm.
us, right? And so all I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
of is like grabbing my dog and getting the hell out of there. So I did see it in the tree. It looked like a leopard. It didn't quite look like a bobcat. And I know that mountain lions can have litters in October, so it could have been a young cat. I didn't stick around to figure out which one it was. I grabbed him, and he would not come back to me. So he failed the test, right? Of like, if, again, hunters and mountain lions, those are the things that I'm most worried about. And he would not come back to me. I had to hike down and get him, grab him. He ran from me, just barking at this thing. So the moral of the story, right, is like, I was trusting of my dogs, but I never required him to prove to me that he could do what I was asking of him. And yeah, when it came test time, like he failed. So I have to reevaluate, what how I'm leading them. And that feedback's been really, really hard. So I will say I've always thought I was a coachable person, but when you start getting feedback that's really has just made me question, like, I don't know how I'm showing up for them. Like I start to internalize it, like maybe I'm a bad dog mom, right? And in some respects, like, yeah, maybe I have failed them. Right. In terms of getting them really socialized and getting them really good on recall. So yeah, I feel like I'm a coachable person, but when it's push comes to shove, I'm like, ooh, really? I mean, I think overall, I am dedicated to getting them, 100% safe, right? I can trust them to be off leash. And so I'm again, like open to this feedback that I need to change my behaviors around them so that they can have the best life possible. So anyways, that's a long introduction and a long story. And really what we're going to be talking about is athletes and how coachable are athletes, but I think it's very real. It's a real example of like how I've thought about this very recently in like,
Hmm.
how open am I to this feedback?
Yeah, like that part. And that is like probably the number one thing that determines an athlete's degree of, like, we'll call it coachability, is their openness and reception to feedback that isn't necessarily like glowing and positive, right? Like
Right.
it's easy to receive feedback that's like, well, for most people it's easy. Not interestingly, some people have a hard time receiving like positive
Yeah.
feedback, which I find interesting. Like most humans though, like love being praised and like love getting positive feedback, and you tell them they're doing something good, and they're likely to continue to do that good thing because we like that feedback so much. The negative feedback, or the feedback that's meant to help us grow, can be way harder to accept as being like real, or and it's an ego thing, right? That is hard, that makes it hard for us to accept, because it's like we want to think of ourselves as like, I'm a good dog mom, or like I'm a good athlete, or I'm a good mom, or I'm a good whatever, right? And so then when you hear negative feedback on that, it challenges like our identity, or who we think we are as people, as athletes, like, and that's where like the defenses can come up. And one thing that I wrote down, like while you were sharing your story, I wrote down the intention versus the actual outcome, right? So like part of the reason why it was likely hard for you to hear feedback from the dog trainer telling you what behavior you could change that would help your dogs is because across the board, your behavior was driven with good intent,
Yeah.
right? And so like when
Right.
your
Yeah.
behavior is like when you're doing the thing with your dogs because you believe it's like with good intent, and then someone comes in and says, actually what we're looking at here is the outcome of the way you did it, not your intent. And so like your intent was to like be a good dog mom, but the outcome is your dog didn't listen when when he smelled
Yeah.
the mountain lion, right? And like
Yeah.
ran off.
Right.
And so like regardless of your intent, the outcome of the way you went about that thing was not the outcome that we were looking for. Therefore, we need to go back and look at your behavior and separate it from your intent. Right. So we're going to
Right.
look at your behavior as a dog mom
Right.
that is less about your intent and more about the outcome of what it achieved with the dogs.
Right.
And
Right.
I
Yeah.
and that is so directly parallel in line with like the way that like, yeah, because like coaches can get coached on like the way that you're coaching, right? Is your coaching effective? And like that can be hard for us to hear. But like our intent is to help our athletes to the very best we
Right.
can. And so then we will choose a method of coaching. Like maybe we'll be really strict and hard on them, or like maybe we'll be like really loving and kind and positive. Regardless of which approach we take as coaches, our intent is to help the athlete. And then,
Right.
but if
Right.
we're not getting the outcome that we want from the athlete, then it's like it may be on us to change our
Hmm.
approach, to that athlete. It also might be on the athlete, like the athlete is also going to hold equal responsibility here in being the kind of athlete that is able to hear feedback about what it is they're doing that is helping them versus not, right? And I think that
Right.
you and I
Right.
both have seen athletes, like I see this it's so clear when like I'm coaching that high school swim team, right? And it's so clear to me. I'll have 20 of them at a practice, and I'm giving, like some sort of feedback, or I'm giving them information. I'm trying to teach them a lesson about something. Like sometimes it's a life lesson on the thing, or sometimes it's specifically on like, this is what your hips and shoulders should be doing, while you're swimming that stroke or whatever. And it's really clear because I'll have probably half the team is like staring at me intently. And you can totally tell, like they're looking me in the eye. I can see like their brain's working and they're trying to understand what I'm saying. And they're trying to think like, okay, how do I do that? And they're very clearly hanging on every word and listening and can't wait to try it. And then in the way that I know, there's a couple ways that I know that the athlete is like really listening and open to the feedback. Number one, they're looking directly at me. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, they're asking questions for like clarifying, right? So do you mean by this? Or like they'll do a thing and be like, hey, will you watch and see? Like, is my arm still crossing over? Right. And they are asking directly for the feedback versus there will be other athletes where it is absolutely crystal clear that they have shut down. They're not hearing what I'm saying, right? I mean, some of them
Mm-hmm.
literally will wear their headphones. Like you're wearing
Wow.
headphones, like while I'm trying to give you know what I mean? And maybe you'll take one of them out, but you still have the other headphone in. And so like you're listening with a very half-assed effort, or like they're totally disengaged. Like you try to lead them through like some sort of movement practice where you're trying to help them understand like this relationship with the movement of their shoulders and hips together or whatever it is I'm trying to teach them. And you can just totally tell by like the half-ass effort that they're giving that they're not really trying. And here's the thing. When you're not trying, like when you're not open to the feedback or open to learning, and then you give like a half-ass effort in trying to learn the thing that you're being taught, like the chances of it working are like they're zero, right? Like it's
Right.
not, you're not going to improve then if you're not really trying. And so then it's really easy to then revert back to the old habits. And then the story in your head was she was wrong,
Right.
right? When the
Yep.
reality was, well, like you didn't actually like hear what I had to say. And you didn't look for where's the benefit in that for me. And then like, how did I try to do the thing that she's asking me to do with the intent of like a degree of openness and curiosity to see like, is her way better? Right. So like, this is how
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing it. I'm an athlete. This is how I've been doing it for a long time. She's trying to tell me to do things differently. And if I'm open to that feedback, I'll try that. At first, it might feel super awkward. I'm not sure if it's right. So
Right.
I'll ask for continuous feedback. Am I doing this right? I'll stick with it because I understand that like this progress is not linear. It might feel super awkward at first, but then like the more I do it, then I'm like, oh, that's what she meant. Okay, I'm getting it. And it would be the same with you if we go back to the dog trainer. If you're like, oh, that's not how I thought things were, I was supposed to do things. My intent was good, but the outcome of my, direction for the dogs was not what I wanted. I don't totally agree with her, but I'm going to be open-minded about this because I want to be like the coachable kind of, dog trainer. So I'm going to listen to
Right.
what you have to say and then let's see if it works. Right. And give
Yeah.
it the full effort before you make a judgment on like, did it work or not? Because
Right.
if you only give it half-ass effort, the chances of that advice like panning out in your favor are so much less. And then you'll prove yourself right. Like the coach was wrong. The trainer was wrong,
Yeah. Right.
and that's like further fodder to like not listen to the coach. But it's like ultimately the only person you're hurting is yourself because like now you're stuck and you're not going to improve, and the level of frustration then goes up, and then you go into judgment mode and just decide that, well, I suck at this, so whatever. And there's the dog
Yeah.
barking.
Right. Sorry. That's braggy, not the well, yeah, and interestingly, you make a great point. Like, and I immediately saw the benefits of the training that I've been doing with you. So I haven't yet started the same type of training with Braggy because he's a
Hmm.
more sensitive dog. Anyway, so I've been training my younger dog because she's also had some more issues that are like front and center. Like she doesn't like other dogs in a bad way. And like it was starting to just really disrupt, like driving into town and she'd see a dog and lose her mind. And, I mean, just out of control. Couldn't take her to the vet. She'd lose her mind. Right. So I had to, and Braggy's actually pretty good. Like he hates the vet, which is another issue. Not the dogs, but the process of going to the vet and getting poked and prodded. But the short of it is like when that happened, when he smelled the cat, right, and took off and wouldn't come back, all I had to do was put on her, little e-collar beep, like it's just a tone, and she immediately came back to me. And so it was like, oh wow, right? She saw him going, she saw that there was something to chase, and she came back, and it was like, okay, right, like this has been a real struggle, a lot of uncertainties, and like coming around to new ideas of like how to train your dog, right? But if this is the result and she is safe and I'm safe, right, then that's worth it. And so it's like, because a lot of these situations, it's like I'm afraid, I'm worried about hunters in the backcountry because I'm afraid he's going to get shot, right? Like it's literally like kind of a life and death situation. If his recall isn't good and he runs up to somebody with a gun and is barking aggressively, even though I don't think he would bite, they don't know that. And so, yeah, Hunter got a gun and he'll get shot. So I have to have a better recall for him. And so exactly that, right? Like it was a painful process, a lot of internally like questioning like myself and like my abilities and like what I'm doing for them. When I'm like, okay, yeah, she came immediately back and stayed with me. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. That's good training. So with athletes, it's like, and this was only a couple months, right? Of like doing this dog training, hard time, like driving up there, a lot of time spent with athletes, right? Sometimes it can take a year, right? To adjust to a different style of training with a different, for a lot of, I'll use one of my athletes, right? Or many of my athletes that have come on board. That's with pace. And I'm like, we're not using pace. We're using heart rate for running. And we're going to use heart rate and power on the bike. And they're kind of equally weighed on the bike. But heart rate really until we get to what I say is we start to use pace when they know their heart rates really, really well. Like, like
Hmm.
they can go out with a heart rate monitor and they will be able to run easy. Right. And that takes, for some athletes, it can take years. Some athletes actually, they can never do it because they cannot open their minds to the benefits of heart rate training. But even for my athletes, I think that are open-minded and that embrace it, it can still be months, right? Of like learning how to hone in on your efforts and your heart rates and like going easier on the easy days to go hard on the hard days. And then seeing, because again, yeah, as you said, progress is not linear. So that process may take several months or maybe even a year, or maybe longer. We don't know, depending.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, what are, for folks listening, right? And they're like questioning, like, oh, am I coachable? Am I not coachable? What are your thoughts, right? Like, what are some things that people could be asking themselves about
Yeah.
this question? Yeah. Or
I feel like
understanding
you were just
themselves
reading my
better. Yeah.
mind because, like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, so if you're like an athlete listening, like, how do you know, like, am I, and before we even say this, like, it's really important to know that, like, being coachable or not coachable is not necessarily like an innate, ingrained, like, personality trait that is not changeable, right? So, like, what we're offering here, it's not necessarily about like who you are as a person or who you are as an athlete, but more about the behaviors that you're displaying. And when we think about it that way, it's more appropriate because it allows you to understand that these are things that, like, it is a choice. To be coachable is a choice that you're going to make. And to not, but I also think this, to not be coachable, like, while it is a choice, I think it's a way more of like a subconscious choice. Like, it's something that you've never really considered before. So, like, even as we go through like some examples of behaviors that depict somebody who is coachable and somebody who is currently not coachable, it's more a matter of like, I would suggest that the people who are not coachable maybe never looked at this the way that we're about to describe it. And so therefore, like, it's subconscious behaviors. But as soon as it's brought to light, like, if you want to be a coachable athlete, then here's some things that you can do. So I have a whole list and we can just sort of like go through them without actually reading the list. But the first thing is, I do think this is the most important thing, is that a coachable athlete will listen to feedback with an open mind. And they'll be very curious about, like, what is she trying to teach me right now? And will then try to employ, like, whatever it is, whatever feedback the coach is giving, they will make a very genuine effort for more than just a minute or two to like employ the thing that the coach is asking them to do, versus the athlete that is not as coachable in the moment will get defensive on that point. And so instead of saying, so like, here's an example. This morning I was swimming with my high school kids, like, it's a holiday, so the pools were closed. And so I was like, look, the ocean's open. And so I was like, this is totally optional. You do not have to come. But like, anyone who wants to come, I'll be the boat ram at 8 and I will swim with you guys. The conditions are going to be really nice. So like, if you want to swim with your coach in the ocean today, you're welcome to do that. So anyway, I had a small group of kids, 11 kids came, and it was really fun. Took them, like, introduced them to ocean swimming, which is great. But like, these are pool swimmers. And like most of them don't have that much experience in the ocean. And so while we were out there, like I was giving them tips about like, here's how to change your stroke. So like in the pool, you would swim like this, but in the ocean, like the water's moving out here, you can't get the same grip. So here's what's important of like how to do this. And I had one swimmer who clearly hadn't done a lot of open water swimming and was swimming with very much like whole face out of the water, trying to look ahead. Right. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to try to do if you're like new to ocean swimming, you're like, where is everybody ahead of me? I'm trying to see them. The water's kind of moving, and so swimming with the head up. And I'm swimming like next to this person and saying like, and seeing head up and going like, well, that is, you're making it way harder on yourself. And so like, I suggested like, you have to swim with your face in the water. And if you can't see them up ahead of you because the water's moving too much, it's fine. Like just look at me and I'll swim near you. And that way you don't have to like look up in sight, for now, just, stay with me. And it's really interesting because like immediately the response from the swimmer wasn't like, oh, thank you for helping me, coach. The response was like, well, here's why I'm doing that. And you know what I mean? Like just this
Mhm.
defensiveness of like, I'm like, I know why you're doing it.
Right, right.
I'm not saying that your intent is bad. I'm saying that the effect of having your head up like
Mhm.
that is making you sink and it's making it harder for you to swim faster. And so like I'm genuinely trying to help you. And instead of saying, thanks, coach, I'll try that. The response was, well, the reason I'm doing that is because blah, blah, blah. Right. And I'm like, that's a difference between like accepting feedback and trying it immediately with an open mind versus like being defensive about why you're sticking with doing things the way you're doing them.
Right,
Anyway,
right. Yeah,
um,
absolutely,
the
agree.
the
Yeah.
coachable athlete will ask questions, right? Like, and I think even in order to ask a question, you have to be paying attention and really trying to internalize what a coach is saying to you, right? So, like, as a coach says something, if you don't totally understand how you would apply that in your own situation, then asking clarifying questions. So, is this what you mean? Do I have that right? Like trying to make sure that like you're understanding what the coach is asking you to do versus I would say the athlete that is less coachable will have the question maybe in their head, but they will just silently guess on whether or not they have it right.
Mhm.
Or like they'll try
Yeah.
maybe to do what the coach is asking them to do, but they won't ask any follow up questions to clarify, like, am I actually doing what you were asking me to do, like in the way that is most effective or, the way you're asking me to do it? They'll just kind of be silent about that. Some of that, I wonder if it's like the degree of self confidence that the athlete has, right? Like, so like the athlete that's asking for feedback, like, do I have that right? I'm trying to clarify that I want to get it right because the answer to that might be no, you don't have it right yet. And so even in asking the question like, do I have that right? You have to be prepared for the answer to maybe be no, you don't have it right yet. And
Mhm.
an athlete with like more fragile self-esteem or a fragile sense of like self-confidence might not be able to hear the answer to their question like no, you don't have it right yet. And so because that answer would be so uncomfortable to hear, they won't ask the question, like, do I
Mhm.
have it right yet? And if you won't ask the question, then the chances of you just like reverting to old habits or doing things the way you were always doing them before are really high. And then, your ability to improve from there is
Mhm.
less,
Mhm.
right? Does that
Yeah.
spark any like example in your head?
Well, I will say, so I'm a very like I do think that this affects introverts more so than extroverts because just they're uncomfortable. Like I would identify as very introverted. And so I think in some at some points in my life I was uncomfortable. I was just uncomfortable speaking, right? But I was very focused, aware, like I wasn't off like
Hmm.
dilly-dallying and picking the flowers and looking at right. But I also was maybe not someone that was going to ask a lot of questions. That actually got me in trouble in my during my PhD because my advisors thought that I was arrogant, that I wasn't comfortable asking
Mm.
the questions. I was more of a figured out myself type of researcher. I still kind of am, although I have learned that sometimes efficiency and being really effective is more important than like figuring out for yourself. So if I have questions, I am way more interested in learning immediately how to do it better than I was probably as a younger researcher, an athlete. I will say the same as an athlete. I think when I first started in triathlon, I, I don't know if I was pretty comfortable asking questions, I guess. And with the online, like I've never done coaching in person, I don't think. Well, other than like camps, right? Like I mean, but with triathlon, it was kind of like, okay, well, swimming, right? Like I didn't grow up swimming. I swam in a river. I wasn't doing team sports. I did join a master's swim and I did ask a lot of questions then. So I'm trying to remember, like, when did I ask questions and when
Hmm.
did I not? No, I was very like, how's my stroke now? And what if I do it this way? And like, because swimming's very technique based. And even, I think I mentioned I was in the least fast lane for a long time. And towards the end of my swimming career, I moved up like one lane. Our master's was like legit good. And I was swimming on like, I could swim hundreds all day on a like 140. So it wasn't like I was a slow swimmer. Right? Like
Hmm.
I was okay, but yeah, we had like pure swimmers, not even just like triathlete swimmers. So yeah, but I think the introverts can struggle here a little bit just because the uncomfortableness with just speaking out. It's not really about confidence or not having confidence. I mean, I guess you could say that in some ways, like extroverted are more confident people, but that's not always the case because I would
I
say I have decent confidence, but I just didn't like to talk. So yeah,
Yeah. I think it
yeah,
probably depends too on like what is your previous experience with like the
right,
coach or the leader, whoever you're asking questions of. Like, is that the kind of person who, like, the kind of coach that would be like, "Oh, I already answered that 4 times,
right,
like you weren't
right.
listening and blah, blah." And like, if you're afraid that you're going to get attacked when you ask a question, that's a totally different scenario. And I would blame
Hmm.
the coach in that point. But if they know that the coach is going to say, "Oh, great question. I'm glad you asked that. Like, thanks for
Right.
helping me like clarify to you that like this is what I
Hmm.
mean or am I talking about." I think that most like high quality coaches would welcome questions. Maybe the only time that I wouldn't, I'm trying to think of like, when would I not welcome a question? And I think it would be the case that like, I've literally already answered that 4 times,
Yeah.
like directly to you, and like you were not listening.
Right.
And like, I'm a human and my patience is like,
Yeah.
it would get tested like in that scenario if I'm like, I've told you this over and over and over.
Yeah.
But part of that
Yeah.
might be like that's just the role of coach, and like I need to then understand that like my role is to be patiently explain it again, and not like maybe you, the athlete, like wasn't ready to hear it the first 3 times I said the
Right.
answer to that, and now you're ready to hear it, so it's on me then to like take a breath and repeat myself in a way that like they can hear it now that they're the one asking the question. Like, okay, great.
Right.
um as
Yeah.
far as
I
like
agree.
the
Yeah.
mindset, let's go back to like our mindset of
Yeah.
the coachable athlete versus the less coachable athlete. How's this mindset of like, what can I learn from this? Right. So, like, let's say that a mistake was made, or a race went poorly, or a training session went poorly. They weren't able to make the intervals. They weren't able to make the send off. They couldn't hit the power, whatever it was, right? Like something didn't go well. The coachable athlete will approach that situation with, what can I learn from this? Right? Do I need to eat more? Do I need to pace myself better? Did I not sleep well the last couple of nights? Am I under lots of stress? Like they will ask like questions about like, why did that not go as well? Was I just not as focused? They'll try to figure that out. What can I learn? Versus the less coachable athlete will just like chalk it up to like, I suck at that, or like, I'm bad at
Yeah.
that. I'm just
Immediately.
not good. Like,
Immediately. Yeah.
immediately, like they will not ask a
No.
question about like, what can I learn? It's a closed-minded judgment on themselves usually,
Yeah.
which you can see
Yeah.
how this feedback loop then goes back to the coaches, because if their internal dialogue is, I suck at this, then the mind is closed to like, I can get better. And so, but if the mindset is, I can get better, then the chances of them being like seeing the coach as like an avenue toward helping them get better, and using the coach to be like, hey, help me get better on this point. If the internal dialogue's like, just, I suck, then you don't even believe that a coach is going to be able to help you, because you just suck at that and it is what it is. And like, you should just give up and stop trying, which largely they do. So like, while they might continue to show up at practice, if they're doing it like mindlessly, not paying attention to what they're doing, right? Not asking questions, like not trying to like make each rep better, not paying attention to like, how does this feel? What can I learn from this? Then the chances of them like, again, that proving themselves right. If you're like, if the belief is, I suck at this, and therefore in practice you're giving a half-ass effort and you're not really focused on like the little details of like what you could be doing to improve, then the chances of you improving go down. So now you're not going to improve, and you're proving yourself right that like, I suck at this. Right.
Yeah.
Because like the next time you really
That's
try, it's going to go poorly again. And that's a terrible like cycle to be in, and to understand the role that you as an athlete are playing in those dynamics of like why this isn't working is really important if you ever want to break out of that like cycle.
Yeah. So I would say I totally agree. But also the other avenue that I've seen for athletes that immediately go to judgment, there's no, the ability to self-reflect is not there. And the alternative is I need to work harder. Like, for example, I'll use an example of an athlete that basically did like a 2.5 to 3 hour race and had like a Gatorade, half bottle of Gatorade, maybe no fueling. Right. And then
Yeah.
and they totally exploded, totally fit, like didn't meet their mark. And I said, like, you can't do that effort at that high of an effort with on Gatorade, or a half a bottle of Gatorade. Well, it was cold and I just didn't feel like eating. Well, but their approach then was like, I need to do more run hard running, like hill repeats and stairs, and I need to do more interval running, and I need to do speed work. And I'm like, you can do all that all day and you're still going to have the same result, because if you don't solve the fueling, like, or you have to become very metabolically efficient, and then, but then you're only going to be limited to a zone 2 effort, right? If you're going to try to do this on pure fat burning, right? Which this athlete was not capable of doing that because they were also a vegetarian. And that's an aside, because vegetarians typically don't have great fat burning capabilities because they eat a lot of carbohydrates. And it's not to say you're
Mhm.
healthy or unhealthy. It just is. It just is. And so when you exercise,
Mhm.
then you need to take in more carbohydrates to fuel your body. Anyways, so I see athletes doing this a lot, though, is they have a bad race, immediately judgment of like, I suck, I just can't do this, I just whatever. And then the avenue is always, I have to work harder, and they might try that for a little bit after some recovery, right? Like they're going to go into a bunch of hard intervals all the time. And what happens? Well, they get sick, they get injured,
Mhm.
they break down, right? Like it's that, and that's in that cycle. I think that cycle plays out a lot, right? And then they have another shitty race, and then they can't reflect, and well, I just need to work harder, on and on and on. And like, there's never any reflection of like, what is actually going on here, and what do you actually need to do to get to where you want to go? So
Mhm. Mhm.
that
And that, I
that
mean, that loops
immediate,
right
yeah,
back into
yeah,
the
yeah.
open to
The
feedback,
negative, yeah,
right? So
yeah,
like, if
right,
you're trying to tell them, like, it's about, what if it was about fueling, and then being
yeah,
open to that feedback, because like the athlete's belief is like, I'm not fit enough, when like the reality is I'm not giving my body the fuel that it needs to do the work that I'm asking it to do. Then, if you're not open to that feedback, then you can't hear that. And again, like, yeah,
right.
not coachable. And
Not
then
coachable. Yeah,
you're not going to improve. That
yeah,
actually leads
yeah,
right into the next point that I wrote down, was along the lines of the athlete, when something isn't going well, or even when it is going well. I feel like this could go either way. Like, they're willing to take responsibility for like their part in the thing, right? And like, that's what the dog trainer was trying to do with you, right? Like, help
right,
you take
right,
responsibility for like the role that you've played, regardless of your intent, right? But
right,
like, the
right.
actions that you were taking weren't like leading to the results that you wanted. And so like, the coachable athlete then will take responsibility and will say like, and I have athletes that do this really well. I have a couple athletes that I think of, and I'm like, and I know it's like, you are going to succeed, because what will happen is like, had a crappy run, right? Like, had a key run, it was a crappy run, and they'll say, this was definitely not my best. My heart rate was higher, and it was way harder than it should have been. Know why? I haven't been taking care of myself lately. I had a couple of late nights, and I know how to get myself back on track. So like, totally aware that like, my choices and
Yep,
behavior in staying up late the last couple of nights, and it was a choice that I made. It was my spouse's birthday, or pick the thing, whatever, right? It was a holiday, and like, I chose to go to that party. And therefore, my run on Sunday morning was way uglier than it needed to be. I know how to fix it. It's fine. And like, from that, you're like, great, right? Like, I don't, my job there is to be
mhm,
like, yep, keep going. You're on the right track. Go
yeah,
to bed early tonight, do the thing. Versus like, another athlete who is less willing to see the pattern and take personal responsibility in that case would be like, that run went terribly, and it's just because I suck, or because my fitness isn't high enough, or because I'm just not good at this, or you gave me a run that was too hard, coach. It's your fault. Right. Like, they'll look
right,
for
right,
somebody else to blame, instead of being like, what was my role? What role did I play, or my choices, before this play into all of that?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Training partners get a lot of, well, so and so was running poorly, and that's not to say I actually encourage my athletes. I prefer them to train with someone that's a little bit underneath their abilities, because most people are overtraining. They could benefit by
Hmm.
slowing down, but a lot of times it's like, well, I didn't get this in because I was waiting for somebody and they never called and they blah, 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 like whatever. Right. And the stories. And I'm like, well, no, you didn't get it in because you chose to not get it in. Like that ownership, like you know, and I understand things happen, right? Like your training buddy who you were planning on meeting didn't show, but that doesn't mean you can't do the workout. Like, I don't know, right? What's you're an adult here. Yeah, but the offset, like offloading to some, like, it's a lack of ownership. It's a lack of, yeah, I have a lot of respect for one of my athletes. We've had some discussions. A lot of people are doing dry January, right? And we've had discussions about his drinking and like how it affects him. And he's, a master's athlete, right? So it does affect him more than it did when he was in his 20s.
Hmm.
And when he has a bad ride, it's like, well, I know why, because I had 2 beers after golf and then I did have a nightcap with, my partner. And yeah, I stayed up too late, drank too much,
Hmm.
and my legs felt like crap. I felt like crap, had a headache. Like, but it was worth it because I enjoyed the beer. Okay, fine. Like, own it.
There you go. Yep.
Like,
Hmm.
that's all you have to do. Recognize
Hmm.
it and move forward.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, totally.
choices and own it. Go ahead. What else you got
Yeah.
on your list? Yeah.
Next is when things get hard, right? So now we're going to be like, we're in the middle of a workout. It's an interval workout where it's challenging and it requires, like focus and staying in it and staying engaged. And the coachable athlete is capable of enduring the discomfort that comes along with a challenging workout, and they will stay engaged in it even if they're not like totally nailing it. They'll keep trying, they'll reassess, they'll reevaluate something. Maybe they'll take an extra 10 seconds rest, but then like they'll try again. Maybe they'll look at what their form is like. They'll pull all the strings trying to help themselves manage the best they can in the moment, versus like the less coachable athlete will do the bare minimum in that time period, or they'll like choose to sit out and they'll give up way earlier than what other athletes will. And again, this is a dynamic I see in person on my swim team every single practice. And sometimes I'll call them out on it and sometimes I don't, because like largely like I see like similar with masters, like I'm presenting this opportunity for you to improve yourself. And like it sounds really bad, but I'm like, I don't really care if you do or not. It's more like it's your journey, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm presenting
Yeah.
you this opportunity and like I'm not going to drive myself crazy, like chasing down the athlete that's not really trying that hard. I'm only going to give as much as like you're willing to give as well. Like I will match your level, but I will not go above it. And so when I see athletes, I mean, it's really interesting. Like the fastest athletes on my team are the ones that are like, they're the first ones in the pool because they don't want to miss the volume of warm up. And like some of the others will take 10 minutes to get their cap on, and then they have to adjust their goggles perfectly before every single workout. And so while everybody else has already swam a 400, there's some athletes that are still adjusting their goggles, and in their head they're like, I missed that whole 400 warm up because like I wasn't comfortable swimming a whole 400 without stopping, so I'm just going to get in on the next set or whatever, right? Or it starts to get hard and they're just going to sit out like down at the other end of the pool and hope that my coach didn't see you. I'm like, no, I saw you. I might not have said anything, but like I see that you're
Hmm.
sitting out of 50 down there. And like,
Right.
sometimes I call it out in front of the whole group, like later, like at the next practice. So it's not individual, like you're doing this, but more like,
Yeah.
this is the kind of set that people are going to want to sit out and, and skip a 50 on the other end. Or this is the kind of set where all of a sudden in the middle, you're really going to have to go to the bathroom, or you're going to have to adjust your goggles. And like, but like, just because your lane mates are doing that doesn't mean you have to do that. So like just learning how to like manage yourself through the discomfort without negative judgment setting in, right? So the negative judgment, it's like, well, everybody else is capable of doing this and I'm having a hard time with it. And so therefore I must suck. Instead of deciding that I'm going to just keep plugging away and trying, with the understanding that if I keep acting in these ways, eventually I'm going to get faster. Like I understand that this takes time to develop. And I'm dedicated to putting that time in and being uncomfortable and doing the uncomfortable thing because I believe the results are coming for me later, versus like some will just do the bare minimum in the moment, maybe not even thinking about how like the total, like those people that skip out wherever they can, wherever they think they can get away with it, they skip out. If we added up the total volume of training that they miss, like over the course of 3 months, like that's significant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
think staying in it and continuing to push when things are hard versus skimping and doing the bare minimum just to check a box
Yeah.
is a difference.
Yeah, I will say I think I've worked with some athletes that would benefit though from actually like, having some more self-awareness. Again, go back to self-awareness about like maybe that session isn't the right one today, right? Like maybe they're getting sick. Like for example, I have an athlete that just came down with the flu and she did an FTP test like the day she did come down. And I'm like, you didn't really have a
Yeah.
and maybe she really didn't because sometimes that harder effort, right, does she would have gotten the flu anyways, but doing the harder effort, right, then set her off, like, it probably really tapped her system, and then she really came down with the flu. That's one example, but there's others that, it's like a badge of honor, right, that they're really sick, but they're still gonna get out and do that track workout, and it's like, "No, actually, that's not helping your situation." But then it's like they
Yeah.
also, I would say, when push comes to shove so some athletes, though, I have seen, right, like, they always want the intensity, always wanna go harder, need to go harder, fitness isn't high enough, but when the stakes are really high, a lot of times they'll crack, right? Like they back off, and this is what I hear from their, mental game in races. It's like, yeah, well, I kind of gave up because I wasn't able to hold the paces I want, so they back it off. And I've seen that in some workouts too, right? Like, I just it was too much, and I think this is where, you know, I'll take ownership as a coach. It's like it's really hard sometimes to coach these athletes because I will say, like, if you're going to do, say a set of 400s on the track, right, or whatever, I will usually say, like, I would like you to do whatever 8 to 12, right, and I want you to cut it when you can't hold these paces anymore. But so I don't you don't need because I can't be there on the track, right, giving you your rest intervals and seeing how your form looks and so I think there's this idea that, well, it just wasn't in me today, so therefore I backed it down. And so for these athletes, maybe I'm too lax, right? I'm too weak on them. Like I need to push them harder. But it's hard because then I also work with some athletes that they need that extra, like you need they need to take it down a notch, right? On in some days. So it is hard as a coach to kind of suss out like what does this athlete need on this day so that you're not giving them an out when the stakes are high and they need to be all in, right? Like they need to have that mental strength. So anyways, I've looked at a lot of my coaching, not philosophy, but my for how I'm coaching, like how I'm interacting, more like how my application, right? Like the philosophy is still there, but the application, I think I've kind of ebbed and flowed, right? About like how strong and how flexible and then how rigid and then, and it does ebb and flow with the athletes, but over time, I think it's also ebbed and flowed a bit. So
Yeah, no, totally.
anyways,
And you
yeah.
bring up a good point about it. So there's nuance to that, right? And understanding that like when you're on, versus when you're not, and
Hmm.
having the capacity to listen. I mean, I just wrote a Substack about that last week about your like your intuition and listening to the intuition, and that sometimes it's uncomfortable, meaning that like if you believe I'm the kind of athlete that never gives up on a set, like I'm the kind of athlete that will push through the discomfort, and you have been your whole life, like, and that is who you are, you're likely a pretty successful athlete if that's how you normally define yourself. And there are times where when we're listening to our intuition, like it will be uncomfortable because the intuition is saying, skip that FTP test today.
Right.
Don't do those last 4 intervals today. Like today it's not right. And having like the level of emotional maturity and self-awareness that is required to understand the difference of like, when am I giving up because I'm being wimpy versus when am I giving up
Yeah.
because it's truly not the right thing for me to do to push through on this
Right.
set today. Right. And like
Right.
understanding the difference between that. I mean,
Yeah.
the athlete that gets that is the most coachable athlete. Like they're
Right.
so like that athlete is absolutely set up for success at some point. Like if it's this year or next year or in 5 years, if you can tell the difference between like this is giving up and being weak and this is throwing in the towel because it's smart, and you know the difference there,
Yeah.
like
Right.
winning,
Yeah.
right? Because
You're
that is tricky at times, and I think that it's probably something that is developed with really smart mentors helping you
Mhm.
understand the difference, right? Like
Right, right.
because if you have a hard ass coach, I had an athlete that I was doing like I do like some how do you call it, like mindset work like on Zoom
Mhm.
calls with athletes as well. And I had an athlete that was saying like she had one of her coaches, she said he doesn't believe in being sick. Like so this athlete was like sick and then trying to like
Some
figure out
belief.
how do I like perform literally. Is I'm
Wow.
like, and here's the thing, like I don't know the degree to which that's true, right? Like I didn't hear it from that
Yeah.
coach, like I didn't, but like at
Yeah.
least here's the thing, her perception is that this
Right.
coach doesn't believe in sickness and doesn't believe that like being sick is a valid reason to skip practice. Like maybe that coach has had previous experience with athletes that have said that they're sick when they weren't sick because they just didn't want to go to practice. Is like they, whatever. And so then he just makes a blanket assumption that like everybody being you say that you're sick, but that's just an excuse and that's just you being weak. I don't know if that to the degree to which
Mhm.
that's his actual belief, but regardless, it was what the athlete interpreted. So however the coach
Mhm.
like communicated that point, the athlete's takeaway was, I need to train through illness to make my coach happy because my coach
Yeah.
said that like this is the thing. And I was like, okay,
Wow. Yeah.
and like if you actually listen like internally, like, A, like how did your practice go when you did that? Like B, when you showed up to practice being sick, did you get everybody else in practice also sick?
Right.
Right? Like, are we like
Yeah.
spreading the flu around to like everyone at practice? Like, and did you set yourself back? And so now it's going to be even longer before you're back to a place where, you feel good. And there's a degree of maturity that goes along with that,
Yeah.
like
It's true.
on
It's
both
true.
the coach and the athletes,
Yeah,
part.
yeah, absolutely. And it's developed, and it's not like you can just know how to approach that dynamic. Like when you start coaching someone new, right? Like you don't always know like how this is going to go. So you
Yeah.
have to do some feeling out of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've done a decent job of that, of like trying to decide like which athletes are the ones that like I need a hot poker to like get them going. Right. And like genuinely, like I'm there to like push them harder and show them that like, or help them show themselves that you're stronger than you think. Right. Like you can do more than you think you can. You give up as soon as it gets uncomfortable. You're like, oh, that was too hard. I can't do that anymore. So like those are the athletes, it's like, yeah, we have to actually really push them and encourage them to be uncomfortable and let them know it's okay. There's other athletes though that, and you can just tell by watching them train over time, that like they're always going, like if you give them 8 to 12 reps, they always do 12, right? If you give them like, like 7 to 7:20 pace, and they always go 6:59 to 7:01, right? Like they're
Right.
always right there, right? That like those are the kind of athletes that probably the role of the coach is going to be to put a leash on them, and pull them back in,
Mhm.
and prevent
Mhm.
them from hurting themselves. And so it's like, understand that's our job then to
Mhm.
understand which athlete is this, do I need to put
Right.
a leash on this one, or do I need to get my hot
Right.
poker out? Right.
Right.
It's
Right.
like one
Right.
of the two.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. What else you
so,
got? What else? What other?
this is
Yeah.
fun. So,
Yeah.
the coachable athlete genuinely enjoys learning.
Yeah.
Right, and, like,
Yeah.
is curious and, like, wants to know more, or like, help me understand, like, and it's not to say that if you don't enjoy learning that you won't be a successful athlete, right? Like, I don't think that it necessarily goes the opposite way,
Mhm. Mhm.
but the difference would be this: the coachable athlete who is likely to improve really enjoys learning, enjoys feeling things out, enjoys seeing, trying different things and, like, looking for the outcome of that, and learning new information. The less coachable athlete in that same situation, when they're trying to learn a new thing, when it's not coming easily, it's just an immediate sense of frustration that sets in, right? And when that frustration sets in, the learning tends to shut down, right? Their ability to continue learning is reduced because they're frustrated that like there wasn't immediate success with the thing. So therefore, I don't know, again, it might just come back to like there's something wrong with me and I suck at this, and then therefore the progress is going to be muted because they're not open-minded enough to stay with the learning process.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
I definitely agree. Yeah.
if you're
Sorry.
an athlete that
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
frustrated really easily, like you tried a new thing and you're immediately
Mhm.
frustrated. And the other thing that I would ascribe that to, and people don't get this, but like I have seen the patterns. People who breathe well, people who breathe low and slow, they're using their diaphragm, they're breathing in and out their nose. And the reason that I say that I connect breathing well with being able to tolerate discomfort is that like not breathing well, like breathing short and shallow, breathing through your nose, not using your diaphragm when you breathe, just puts us in like a nervous system state where we're way more on edge, right? And so anything is likely, like we're likely to react instead of respond, like when we're in that state. When we're presented with a challenge, we're way more likely to just get frustrated with it right off the bat, versus like the ability to really take stock in the learning process and like help me understand requires a nervous system state of like relaxed awareness. And that like the breath is the thing that connects those, like
Hmm.
it connects into that state. So it's not necessarily that like, I don't know how to say this, but like the breathing is just the thing that puts you in the state that allows you to learn versus get frustrated. And so if you're looking at a common trait of someone who gets frustrated as they're trying to learn, likely that person is not breathing well.
I agree. Yeah, I
And it's
agree.
like, like look for that to show up and you'll be like, oh, like I'll see it. And that leads into the final point that I have about as far as the traits of a coachable athlete versus someone who's not as coachable, is that the coachable athlete will be more patient and more consistent, more likely to stick with the process, versus the less coachable athlete will look for the quick fix. If something's not working
Oh yeah,
immediately, like
yeah.
not willing to stay with it, like gonna judge either themselves or the process or the coach who's giving them the advice. But they're like, if it didn't work immediately. But again, if you take that back to like what mental and physical state is that athlete in, if they're not breathing well, then they're way more likely to find themselves looking for the quick fix, or like just being anxious about it, or giving up too early, or deciding that didn't work.
I completely agree. And I've also, for athletes that I haven't had too many of these in the last couple of years, but that when they would interview, right, they'd be interested in coaching and it's like, oh, how many, have you worked with a coach before? And I do have a lot of athletes that come to me that have never worked with a coach before, which is great. They're kind of brought on board through word of mouth, and that's awesome. I've always said that like athletes that go through a lot of coaches, like every year, right? They're trying something new. Like that's kind of an orange flag. It's not a red flag that I wouldn't take them, but that's the type of athlete that I think is also looking for quick fixes, not willing to really commit to the process, not willing to look internally at what their problems are and how they're contributing to their lack of progress. And they heavily weigh on the coach to provide a solution and an equation, right, that's going to work immediately or nearly immediately. And if the coach doesn't provide that, then they're done and they find a new coach. And I mean, that's, yeah, orange flag for me in terms of taking on an athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I have one observation, one thing that I thought I might add to the list, which it probably is encompassed in several of your topics you've already talked about, but I think there's like an ability to balance their, how do I say this? Like I'm trying to think, like they balance of a lot of things, like balancing the data with how they feel. They can balance their emotional, like their real passion, right, with their life, right? Like they can weigh these things fairly, like they're very balanced. I don't know how to say it, but like they're a balanced athlete. They don't get tied up in any one session. They can kind of see like, okay, that I've had a couple of bad sessions, like can do the reflection of like, why are they not going well? They can, but they can keep it in perspective, right? Maybe that's it. It's like they have perspective on
Mm.
where they want to go and what they need to do, or maybe they're looking to learn what they want to do, but they can have, they may have really big goals, but they don't stress over them all the time, right? Like I will commonly field questions from athletes of like, can I do XYZ by this time? Right. And I'm like, well, we have to see, like, I'm not a mind read. I don't have a crystal ball, right? To say
Hmm.
like what you're capable of, but can you commit to the process? Can you commit to staying healthy and not, sleeping well
Hmm.
and doing all the things, right? And then maybe, yeah, if that might be a stretch, but we'll see how it goes. But athletes, I think that are coachable and that, stick to the process well and that end up meeting their goals, like are the ones that can balance things, and I don't mean like literally balancing and like on a like an equilibrium, but it's like they're going to balance how they feel with the data. They're going to balance what their goals are with what their time availability is or what with their family commitments, right? They have that perspective of this is really important to me, but I have these other things. And so I'm not going to get tight. Like they might have a bad workout and then they just let it go. Like, okay, yeah, we're done. We're like a short memory, right? Like what was the phrase? Like they have a memory of like a goldfish. What was that? That's a great. Did you watch? Oh gosh, what's the name of the show? I'm just so bad with show
Ted
names.
Lasso.
Ted
Ted
Lasso, yes.
Lasso. Yeah.
The,
I
yes,
love that
the
show.
memory yeah, I love it. I love Ted Lasso. But memory of a goldfish, right? Like, you just have to let it
Hmm.
go and move on to the next thing and, try to be better, right? Try to understand why maybe it's just a bad session, right? Like, it just didn't go well for any myriad of reasons, and you just let it go. You move on to the
Hmm.
next one. So I
Hmm.
think there's that, and I don't know how to phrase it. Like, they're a balance, they have perspective, they're interested in learning, they're interested in data, but they are not going to get tied up in it, right? And they can keep the long view. They're not going to get, down from a few. They're also not going to get super excited when things go well, right? They're not emotionally attached to their performances on any given day or any race, right? Like, they're a well-rounded person, and athletics is
Hmm.
something that they do, right? But it's not like they need it to feed some ego. And you mentioned ego. I know you mentioned ego, but there's also like the ego that's like, it's not that we're saying they're overconfident, because a lot of times ego is actually driving the negative. Like, a strong ego can also be the one that's constantly telling them, I suck, I can't do this. Like, that's very centric. It's egocentric, and doesn't mean that they are overly confident and they have these,
Hmm.
oh, I can do anything. It's actually it could be the opposite. It could be one or the other, but it's that self centralized
Hmm.
idea, that they cannot unravel it from, essentially. But yeah, that's the only
I
thing.
think
I think
what
the
you're
list is
talking about
great,
is
but
like
yeah,
if you if your if your performance is connected to your self-worth,
right.
then that is a real problem, right?
It's a real
Like that
problem. Yeah,
is it's a real problem because then like you're only like good enough if you perform well. If you're only good enough if you went
right,
faster than last time, you're only good enough if you actually win. And like that's a
right.
really fragile place to be because like winning that game is never actually going to happen.
Yeah,
So when you can
right.
separate out like your performance, like I'm an Ironman athlete and I love doing
Mhm,
Ironman. I'm also like a wife and a mom and a teacher, and I'm
right,
really good at like these other things, and I have these other things in my life, and I do this on the side. I might also be really good at doing this thing. I'm a good person outside of that thing. Like
right,
if anyone who can't like separate out their worth as a person from their performance in like your performance at
right,
your job, your performance as a mom, your performance on the athletic field, your performance in the water, like you have to be able to separate out those things in order to and when you do that it actually frees you up
right,
to enter that coachable mindset of like approaching with an open mind because like it takes away the fear of failure because you can go try the thing and be open-minded about it. It might not work at first, and like if it doesn't and it fails, it doesn't mean you are a failure. It meant that like that approach didn't work, but it was not like a
right.
black mark against like who you are as a person or your self-worth. Yeah, so
Yeah,
like separating those two things out is like a really important part. I want to touch
yeah.
on, and maybe we can kind of finish with this too, but I think you and I talked about this before we hit record. And so I just want to make sure that we mention this part. And maybe we did talk about it and I just have a terrible memory like a goldfish. But like in what situations am I most coachable?
But we haven't
Versus
yet.
in what situation am I less coachable? And if you think of that as like a self reflection question, and we can all answer those, like for sure, there are situations where I would say I am closed minded and not coachable. And when I think about what those situations are and like what is the common thread, right? Like what's the thing that connects those situations where I am closed minded and not open to your opinion? And it's likely because for something like something has happened that makes me not trust you or not respect you. And so if I'm an athlete or even a person or whatever, like cuz I feel like this applies in many areas, but
Yeah,
like if I've
careers and yeah,
lost
yeah.
trust or lost respect, then like your opinion or your feedback is not
Mhm,
welcome.
right,
Versus like if I trust and respect someone, I'm wide open. My brain and my heart are wide open to hearing what they have to say. And so I feel like as coaches, that's really important for us to know and understand because, like, if we want athletes to be able to hear us, then it is our job as coaches to first establish trust, establish a degree of respect, mutual respect. Right. Like, I respect you as an athlete. You respect me as a coach. Great. I'm on your team. You know for sure that, like, I am on your side. Like, I want the best for you. And so I would never intentionally give you advice that'll steer you wrong, right? I might be wrong at
mhm,
times in like as we tried
right,
this approach, but at least you know that my intent was good in that. And as soon as we realize that this approach doesn't work for you, then again, because I'm on your side, we will take a different approach. We'll look to try something different. In that way, we're establishing that like trust and respect of a relationship that allows the athlete to be open minded and hear us. So I feel like that is a really important thing for, because the thing is like it may be different for other people. Like I don't know if everyone has the same like in your case when you're
Mhm,
not coachable, like is
mhm.
that like is it different
Yes.
or is it the same as
No.
what mine
I
is?
mean, I totally so I have experiences of I can remember in my past, right, when I
Mhm.
was a collegiate athlete and moving into a situation, I felt like I was very open-minded, wanted to excel, and through the course of a season, the coaches completely lost. I lost respect for them, and now after having whatever 25 years with some more perspective, the coaches of this soccer team were also just out of college, and so they were probably not in a good position to be coaching people that were basically their age, right? And so,
Mhm.
it was hard at the time, and I ended up transferring after that because it was such a bad experience, and I largely blame the coaches were just not equipped to coach a collegiate team, and I think they only coached maybe like another year, like the head coach and the assistant coach. But the other so yes, I mean, lost respect for them, and it wasn't that I became, disgruntled, but I just kind of checked out. Like, as an introvert, it was like, "I'm probably not gonna do this next year, and this is not going well, and I'm not enjoying it, and I don't really trust them to get us as a team to be able to improve," and that was the end goal, right, obviously. In another I'll just be very honest, I think towards the end of my right now, or my hiatus of triathlon, the very ending my when I was the last few years that I was working with Lucho, and I feel very bad because I became a very uncoachable athlete. And it's not that I didn't respect him. I absolutely do. And I absolutely I wanted his opinions and guidance and knowledge and all of that. It was definitely not respect that I had lost. I had just lost my drive to perform and compete. And so I like he would make suggestions on runs and this, and I'm like, yeah, I know I should do that. I really should, but I just want to go hike with my dogs. Right. Like I lost the I just and so eventually it was like, yeah, well, we're just gonna take a break because I'm just literally not doing anything that he was putting in to my training peaks. And it was like I wanted to do my own thing at that point. And so but it wasn't because I lost respect for him.
Yeah,
My
fair.
focus was just, not there anymore. So I
Mhm.
felt, and I apologize many times. I'm like, I'm very uncoachable right now. I think I've said it to you. Like, right now, for triathlon, I'm very uncoachable. For dog training,
Mhm.
my motivation is very high to get my dogs trained up to be able to have off leash adventures and have amazing lives. And so my motivation and my focus is very high and so therefore I'm very open minded, right, of what
Mhm.
wanting to do to make this happen, even though it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard to get that feedback that, maybe I've screwed them up. So yeah, yeah.
It's never too late to change. And you're being coachable by choice, which is the key.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And I've had athletes that have kind of come and gone to ebbed and flowed, right? In terms of their own. I've asked them, like, is there something that I can do better? Like, can we and it's just they've lost their motivation to train. And it's like, well, I've actually let people go. Like I've turned off their billing. I've said, look, just come back when you're ready because you're not doing any workouts. And I know it's
Mhm.
not because they don't trust me or they don't respect me. It's just their life is not in line with doing the workouts at this point, and there's no point for me. Like, there's literally nothing I can do, right, to get them to go out
Mhm.
for a run. So
Mhm.
we're wasting both of our times here, and so I've just turned them off and said, "Come back
Yeah.
whenever you're ready." And I don't
Yeah.
think it's a respect thing. It's just they're not coachable because they don't
Yeah.
want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
Totally
yeah
fair.
yeah yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
So
think I feel pretty good about that. Yeah. You feel like
yeah,
I feel like we
I
did
think
it.
we've I think we've covered
I
most
think we covered.
most of the topics. Yeah. So it was a
Yeah.
good one. If you guys have
Yeah.
any topics you'd like us to cover, please drop Michelle or I an email or comment on YouTube, or yeah, let us know. Reach out, and we would be more than happy to cover any topics that you've got questions about. Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. Take.
Always a
Oh, see you
pleasure.
next time.
Okay. Bye.